If you love heartwarming tales of unexpected love, second chances, and the kind of courage that reshapes lonely lives, make sure you settle in and listen closely. And before we dive into this powerful story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, so you never miss a story that might just touch your own heart the way this one will. Because today's story will remind you that sometimes the people who feel most forgotten are the ones destined to create the strongest families. Out on the open plains of Montana, where the horizon stretches farther than any man can see and the wind carries whispers of hope and heartbreak, lived a cowboy named Luke Harper, a widower whose rugged face bore the quiet scars of a man who had lost more than his share of dreams. Luke had once believed that love was a promise meant to last forever. But the sudden passing of his beloved wife left him not only with a hole in his chest, but also with the heavy responsibility of raising two young daughters. Clara and June, who looked to him for comfort, he struggled to give. The ranch was vast and lonely, the nights cold, and though Luke worked tirelessly to keep the cattle fed and the fences mended, the empty chairs at the dinner table echoed with an absence that no amount of hard labor could silence. Each day he woke before dawn, saddled his horse, and rode out into the fields. Yet each evening he returned to a home that smelled faintly of memories and sounded of quiet sobs his girls thought he could not hear. He knew they needed more than food and shelter. They needed the softness of a mother's touch, the gentle wisdom of a woman's heart, and he prayed silently for an answer, even as he told himself he was too stubborn to ask for help. Across the small town of Willow Creek, where gossip traveled faster than a prairie fire, lived a young woman named Emma Lee, whose life had been marked by misjudgments not her own. Emma was the daughter of a traveling preacher who had died when she was only 16, leaving her in the care of distant relatives who considered her a burden. When she refused to marry the wealthy storekeeper they had chosen for her, rumors began to swirl, cruel words painting her as difficult, proud, and unsuitable. By the time she turned 22, Emma carried the heavy label of an outcast, working odd jobs for a few coins and living in a drafty room above the old mill. She had long since stopped expecting kindness from people, but she had not stopped believing in the quiet goodness of life, and every evening she would stand by her small window, watching the sunset stain the sky with fire, whispering prayers for a place to belong. Fate, as it often does, wove their separate heartaches together on a chilly autumn morning when Luke rode into town for supplies. He noticed her first by the way the wind teased a stray curl across her cheek, and the quiet strength in her eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of unspoken battles. Emma was stacking sacks of grain outside the general store, her hands red from the cold, when their eyes met. Something passed between them, a spark neither could name. And Luke, who had long forgotten the sound of his own heart stirring, felt a sudden pull he could not explain. Days later, he returned with his daughters, who shyly clung to his coat as he bought flour and sugar, and Emma knelt to greet them with a warmth that melted their timid silence. That night, Clara whispered to her father that the lady at the store had eyes like morning sunlight, and Luke, lying awake beside the cold emptiness of his bed, found himself thinking the same. Over the following weeks, Luke contrived excuses to visit town, sometimes for tools he did not need or feed he already had, just to exchange a few words with Emma. He learned of her hardships, her quiet resilience, and the way she still believed in love despite every door life had closed on her. He admired her courage, but more than that, he admired the gentleness with which she listened to his daughters, asking about their ponies and braiding their hair with ribbons she bought from her own meager wages. Slowly, Luke began to see what his heart had been searching for. A woman not just to help him raise his girls, but to share the burden of loneliness and the possibility of joy. Yet fear held him back. The fear of offering love again only to lose it. The fear of asking a woman who had suffered enough to take on the weight of his world. One night, after tucking Clara and June into bed, he stepped onto the porch and stared at the endless stars. The air smelled of pine and frost, and in that silence he heard his late wife's voice, not in words, but in the steady memory of her love, urging him to be brave, to open his heart once more. The next morning, Luke saddled his horse and rode into town with a resolve that felt both terrifying and right. He found Emma sweeping the porch of the general store, her cheeks pink from the cold. Dismounting, he removed his hat and stood before her, his eyes steady but his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. "Emma," he said, "I've watched you face this world with a strength most folks don't even recognize. My girls need someone like you. Truth is, I need someone like you. I can't offer riches or an easy life, but I can promise a home filled with honest work, respect, and love. I need a mother for my daughters, and you need a home. Will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, the world held still. Emma felt the rush of every cruel word ever spoken about her, and every lonely night she had endured. And then she saw in Luke's eyes a sincerity so pure it banished every shadow. Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness but of a joy so unexpected it stole her breath. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely more than the wind. "Yes, I will." Luke exhaled, relief flooding his chest, and for the first time in years a smile broke across his weathered face. Word of their sudden engagement swept through Willow Creek like wildfire. But for once the town's gossip carried a story worth celebrating. Within weeks, Emma moved to the Harper Ranch, where Clara and June greeted her not with shyness, but with the eager embrace of children who had waited their whole lives for a mother's love. The old house, once quiet and cold, began to ring with laughter, the smell of fresh bread filling the kitchen, and the sound of Emma's singing drifting across the fields at dusk. Luke, who had once feared his heart was buried beneath grief, discovered that love was not a betrayal of the past, but a tribute to it. A chance to honor the love he had lost by creating new happiness. Together they mended fences, both literal and emotional, proving that family is not always bound by blood, but by the courage to open one's heart. And as the seasons turned and the ranch flourished, the widower cowboy and the outcast bride built a life so rich in love that even the harshest Montana winter could not chill its warmth. Their story reminds us all that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in unexpected packages, that second chances are not accidents but miracles waiting for the brave. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that love can bloom even in the coldest corners of life, make sure you subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today, because you never know whose lonely night might be brightened by a story like this.